20-point per game scorer and former WAC Player of the Year, Tyon Grant-Foster remains available in the transfer portal. Could he be Gonzaga's Khalif battle replacement?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances by using Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 50% off your first year. Well, folks, Andrew Nembhard led Indiana to a series win over Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference of the NBA playoffs. Rui Hachimura and the Lakers were eliminated. We're going to talk about that. Dominic Harris found a new home in the transfer portal. We get that. And Sacramento State's recent high-profile moves. Is it something to pay attention to? Are they on the right track as a basketball program? We'll talk about all of that to close out the show today. But first, we got a big name in the transfer portal we have yet to discuss here on the Locked On Zags podcast, a player who in a lot of ways checks the boxes that we're kind of looking for a big name transfer portal addition for Mark Few and the Zags as we await any update for Gonzaga in the transfer portal. They are one of the very few high-profile programs that has not made a move in the transfer portal up to this point. I believe if among high major programs, if you include Gonzaga in that conversation, Stanford and Marquette, I think, are the only other schools that have yet to make a transfer portal addition this offseason. Of course, Gonzaga added Braden Smith and Jalen Warley, who are coming in next year, but still haven't seen any big moves yet. So let's start with who Tyon Grant-Foster is, a name that's probably familiar to Zag fans, but the story is pretty remarkable for this young man. 6'7" guard out of Kansas City. He actually began his career at the junior college level at Indian Hills Community College. He was the number 2 ranked junior college player when he transferred to Kansas. This is where he started his Division I college basketball career back in the 2020-21 season, back in the COVID year. He played 22 games for the Jayhawks, about 8 minutes a game. So wasn't like a big-time player for them, but was fairly regularly in the rotation and playing decent minutes for Bill Self's team. Played averaged 3 points, a little over 2 rebounds per game. Shot 3 of 23 from 3 for a juicy 13% from beyond the arc. We'll talk about the 3-point shooting in a second. Much more effective on the 2-point shots, however, a little over 52%. After that one season at Kansas, he transferred to DePaul in the Big East, but only played 1 game at DePaul. Here's what happened there. At halftime of his first game with the Blue Demons, Tyon Grant-Foster, going into the locker room, started to feel dizzy, collapsed, and to the horror of his teammates around him, started foaming at the mouth. Everybody freaked out. They didn't know what was going on. The training staff had to full-on resuscitate him, take him to the hospital. Over a 10-day stay at the hospital, he had his heart shocked 3 times, and they never really diagnosed what caused Tyon Grant-Foster's heart to have major issues, but he was told by doctors that he was not going to play competitive basketball ever again due to the scarring on his heart from surgery. He did make a recovery, start to play again, collapsed again during a pickup game, had a second heart surgery, and 16 months after that, Tyon Grant-Foster returned to college basketball. It's a very triumphant story. He, of course, missed the 22-23 season, and he returned for Grand Canyon, having transferred again, joined the Lopes in the Western Athletic Conference. And in his first full season back, his first full season since that year at Kansas, Tyon Grant-Foster was electric for the Lopes. 20.1 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, 50% on 2-pointers, shot 33% from 3, far and away the best mark from the 3-point line that we've seen from him in his career. He was also about 75% from the free throw line, but more important than the percentage is the volume. Tyon Grant-Foster got to the free throw line a little more than 8 times per game in his tremendous junior season for Grand Canyon in 23-24. 8 times per game. Yes, he's not as effective of a free throw shooter as somebody like Khalif Battle, but you're going to make 75% of your free throws and you're going to get there 8 times a game. That's 6 free points every single game. You can't complain about that. GrantFoster WAC Player of the Year. He led the conference in scoring, of course, was one of the national leaders in points per game at 20.1. He was also the WAC tournament MVP. Not surprisingly, getting into the NCAA tournament, Grand Canyon was a 12 seed. They pulled an upset in Spokane over 5-seeded St. Mary's, 22.7 boards and a pair of steals for GrantFoster in that game. Again, 22 points on 6 of 13 shooting is good in most games. It's very good against St. Mary's. He then turned around and had 29 points, 8 boards, and 3 blocks against Alabama, the 4 seed in the second round game, which was a loss by Grand Canyon. Bama went all the way to the Final Four that year. And then what happened after that is that GrantFoster somewhat surprisingly returned to Grand Canyon. Most folks thought he was going to put his name. He did put his name in the NBA draft process, pulled out of the draft towards the very end of the draft cycle. And I think it was a big surprise to basically everybody that he was not only returning to college basketball, but he didn't enter the transfer portal again. So he was returning to Grand Canyon. And I think the surprise was more so that it was a weak draft class in 2024. And the odds of him boosting his draft stock as a already very old college basketball player coming off of a tremendous season and playing for a team like Grand Canyon didn't really seem like the draft stock had anywhere to go but down. And unfortunately, that is what happened for GrantFoster. He dealt with ankle injuries throughout this most recent season. Just played 26 games, started 17 of them for the Lopes, played 27 and a half minutes per game. I don't know how much the ankle injury impacted his explosiveness or his scoring, but his efficiency just really wasn't good last year for the Lopes. He still averaged 15 points a game, but that's still 5 off from where he was the previous year, about 6 boards, about 2 assists. 3-point shooting went from 33% to 23%. 2-point scoring was still about 48%, so not terrible there. Still took over 7 free throws per game, but shot it at just 68.5% from the free throw line. Again, 75% on a high volume is great. 68, 69% on a high volume, it's still not bad, especially with the volume, but you'd like to see him cash in more from the charity stripe, especially because one of his best skills is getting to the line, and it doesn't do you as much good if you're not able to finish strong in that area. Speaking of finishing strong, Tyon GrantFoster did have a strong end to the year, which I think gives some optimism that maybe the ankle injury was bothering him more than folks may have expected or anticipated. In his final 9 games in a Grand Canyon uniform, GrantFoster averaged 17.5 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, shot 31.5% from 3, and 59.5% on 2-pointers. So a much more efficient scorer down the stretch for the Lopes. That included an 18-point game on 7 of 12 shooting in the WAC tournament win over Cal Baptist. And that included 23 points, 4 boards, and 3 assists, including shooting 3 of 7 from 3 in Grand Canyon's NCAA tournament opening loss to Maryland. Right now, there hasn't been an official list or anything revealed for who is interested in GrantFoster out of the transfer portal. There was a lot of rumors that he was set to commit to Michigan State. There was folks online saying it's done, it's happening, it's going to happen next week. And that was like 2.5 weeks ago. So haven't seen anything concrete about the Michigan State. Don't know if that means Tom Izzo and the Spartans have moved on, if GrantFoster's still negotiating, what may have happened there. But just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. It still could. He still could end up playing for the Spartans. But the fact that it hasn't happened yet means he's still ostensibly on the market and available. There's no official list. I think you got to toss a place like Kansas State out in the mix because he's from Kansas City. He's from the state, so it certainly could make some sense, especially for a program that has historically taken on reclamation projects like this out of the transfer portal, has a ton of holes to fill on the roster after losing most of their team to the transfer portal this year. We know Jerome Tang's got big money as they spent a whole bunch of money in the transfer portal last year, so a lot of connections that I think could make that make some sense. We already know he looks good in purple, so maybe Kansas State will be the place he ends up. But I think the big question is, we don't really know what he's asking for in the transfer portal or what role he's looking for, things like that. But teams are going to have to be concerned here. He's had one tremendous season. And certainly the fact that he's played 2 seasons the last 2 years and hasn't had any recurring heart issues or anything like that, I think that issue can be relatively put to rest. He's still a concern, obviously, but not a major one. But he has only really had one great year. Last year, he was good, but he was not great. And obviously, the ankle injury is probably not a big deal, but now you have multiple injuries. You have a player who hasn't been consistently good. Like, I think he's still highly sought after, but if he's looking for, to be paid and treated like the guy who scored 20 points per game and won WAC Player of the Year, a lot of programs are probably not quite willing to invest in that level. So I'm very interested to see. I think that that's why a player who is this talented is still available on the market, because maybe the price points aren't matching up and what he wants and what he's looking for. Maybe teams are a bit hesitant this is speculation on my part, but I think it makes sense based on the profile of said player and the lack of having him seen, or the lack of him signing anywhere at this point. Now, in terms of the fit at Gonzaga, again, if you've been listening to these shows fairly regularly, you know kind of what we think Gonzaga is after based on the other players that they have pursued in the portal. A bigger high-scoring guard, I think, makes a ton of sense for Gonzaga alongside, Braden Smith, your starting point guard, who's more of a distributor. And then you have Jalen Warley and Emmanuel Innocente coming back on the wings. They're not scorers. They're very good on-ball defenders. They're very good overall defensive players, facilitators, but they're not scorers. Steele Venters is a very good three-point shooter if he is healthy. Davis Fogel coming in as a freshman, I don't think you can rely on too much. So you need more rim pressure. You need somebody who wants the ball in his hands, who wants to go get a bucket, who can score on the perimeter. And you want somebody with some size, as we saw with last year's backcourt of Nolan Hickman and Braden Smith, of Ryan Nembhard, was too small. And Braden Smith's about the same size as Ryan Nembhard. So I think having a two guard next to him who's bigger would make a lot of sense. So again, GrantFoster checks all those boxes. He's a lot like Khalif Battle. He's bigger than Khalif Battle. He's 6'7". Battle was listed at 6'5", although I think GrantFoster's about the same weight, so he's a little bit thinner, a little bit skinnier than Battle, who was kind of built like a linebacker, so that's not a surprise. GrantFoster also, as we mentioned, elite at getting downhill, at getting to the free throw line, at converting around the rim. He's not as good of a free throw shooter, but I think the skill set of getting to the rim is valuable for Gonzaga, even though, as again, those of you who listen regularly know, I think Gonzaga didn't utilize Khalif Battle to the very best of his abilities in that specific space because he wanted to shoot more threes. I'm hopeful that wouldn't be the case with GrantFoster, who is historically just not a good three-point shooter. And that's the biggest concern for pursuing a player like Tyon GrantFoster. I think within the scope of his skill sets, not being a great three-point shooter is okay. Like, I think that he is so good at doing other things that his lack of consistent outside shooting doesn't really hurt who he is as a basketball player. But Gonzaga needs three-point shooting. And I think it's just so obvious that that's a need for this team coming off a year where they were bad, the worst they've ever been in the Mark Few era. And they've lost 87% of the three-point shots that they made last year. Those guys are not on the roster anymore. And when you replace them, sure, Steele Venters, again, if he's healthy, he's a huge three-point shooter, but Warley's not. Smith's okay. Innocente's not. Fogel not really expected to be. Like, they don't have a lot of three-point shooting coming in. So I would be, if GrantFoster was the big addition for the Zags, I'd be thrilled for about 85% of it, because the size, the downhill, the length, the experience, the score first mentality, all of that I think fits really well with what Gonzaga wants and needs to round out this roster. But they also need three-point shooting. If you're pairing GrantFoster with another addition that's more of a pure three-point shooter, somebody who maybe doesn't do a whole lot else but is very good at that. I'll toss a name out there. Marcel McCreary from Northern Colorado is another name on my list that we may do more of a deep dive on later. He didn't do a whole lot for Northern Colorado, except he shot 41% from three on 3 threes per game. You bring that guy in, he comes off the bench, he bombs threes. Him and Steele Venters are your outside shooting, your floor spacers, and GrantFoster is just more of a do-it-all versatile offensive weapon. I think that totally works. I think that absolutely works for Mark Few and the Zags. Are they going to do it? I don't know. Is GrantFoster even really attainable for the Zags? Hard to say. But he's a really talented basketball player who checks enough of the boxes for what Gonzaga needs in the transfer portal that I would highly recommend them really strongly pursuing him, because I think it could really work in Mark Few's system. Well, folks, Andrew Nembhard's reputation as an elite playoff performer continues to grow as his Indiana team advances in the NBA playoffs. We got more on that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. And if you already have a console, well, no problem. A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. And maybe you don't have any interest in gaming. Well, great news. The Amazon Fire TV Stick is the perfect go-to for all of your family's entertainment needs. We have one on every single TV in our house, and the platform is really easy to use, really easy to navigate, and it's extremely customizable. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd generation, and Fire TV Cube 3rd generation. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from talking about a transfer portal target for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs in Tyon Grant-Foster to instead talk about the Zags in the NBA playoffs. We had one player eliminated. We had a couple advancing. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the new home in the transfer portal for former Gonzaga guard Dominic Harris. We start. Andrew Nembhard and the Indiana Pacers advance to the Eastern Conference semifinals, where they will take on the 1-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers. Pacers were the 4 seed who took down the 5-seeded Milwaukee Bucks 4-1, won in a 5-game series. They won the final game in overtime, 119-118. Andrew Nembhard in that game, 15 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, and 3 steals. I will not spend a long time talking about how sad I feel about Damian Lillard and his injury and now having to miss all of next season. And we'll see what that looks like for him returning at age 36, coming off a missed year. But gutted for Dame, happy for Andrew Nembhard, who's already made a strong reputation for clutch performances and for performing well in the playoffs. He did this last year. He played exceptional in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Boston Celtics in a pair of games that Tyrese Halliburton missed. And now he's been very stellar for Indiana this year. And in fact, an average of his last 10 NBA playoff games, Andrew Nembhard is averaging just under 18 points, just over 6 assists per game. He's shooting 56% from the field, 50% from 3, 88% from the free throw line. He has been tremendous for Indiana when they get into the playoffs. He started every game this season in the regular season. He is a stalwart member of Indiana's young core and one of the best second-round picks of the last 5 years. That's not even hyperbole. That's not even homerism. And it's a little bit of homerism, but it's true. It's a true statement. Andrew Nembhard has been fantastic. And when he was drafted, first of all, most did not expect he would get drafted at all, never mind as the first pick of the second round. And then he signed what was at the time the highest amount of guaranteed money for a second round pick in the history of the NBA. That record has since been passed and probably passed again as those contracts continue to get bigger and bigger. But at the time, it was a shocker that Nembhard, again, a player that most did not even have on their mock drafts, was signing the largest guaranteed contract in the history of the game for a second round pick. And now it is a bargain. It is a big old steal for the Indiana Pacers because he has been so unbelievably good. The Andrew Nembhard story is one of my all-time favorites, and it keeps getting written. And every new chapter is more and more fun. I'm so excited to see the continued progression of his career at the NBA level. Other Zags in the NBA playoffs, we already talked earlier this week about Chet Holmgren in Oklahoma City sweeping the 8th-seeded Memphis Grizzlies and Brandon Clark, who was out with an injury. Chet was phenomenal in that series. Will now get a chance to take on the winner of the Denver Nuggets Los Angeles Clippers series. I'm recording this Thursday at about 3:30. Game 5 between Denver and Los Angeles is at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're listening to this on Friday, that game has already taken place. If Denver won, they have won the series and will face Oklahoma City. If the Clippers won, it's setting up another game in that series. Strother has only appeared in 2 games so far for Denver, has yet to score as they have tightened up their rotation. Speaking of not playing in the playoffs, Anton Watson and the Knicks up 3-2 in their series over the 6th-seeded Detroit Pistons. Game 5 is starting in about an hour as I'm recording this. So again, you're listening on Friday. Watson and the Knicks may have already advanced in the playoffs, but Watson is not with them right now as he was on a two-way contract coming into the season. And then Rui Hachimura and the Los Angeles Lakers eliminated by the 6-seeded Minnesota Timberwolves, an upset for Minnesota, taking down the 3-seeded Lakers. 1 in 5 games, 4-1 for Minnesota. Rui, though, was very, very good. He had back-to-back 23-point performances in games 4 and 5. In the most recent game, he had a monster dunk on Rudy Gobert, drove baseline, flushed it with his left hand. It's seriously, go watch the clip if you haven't yet. It was really, really fun play from Rui. It was about the only thing Rudy Gobert didn't do well in that game is he dominated the Lakers in order to get his Minnesota team to a victory. Rui finished the series averaging about 15 points and 5 boards, shot 49% from 3, but it was not enough for the Lakers to advance. That's it on the NBA playoff, guys, but I do want to quickly mention a former Zag, Dominic Harris, has transferred to Loyola Chicago out of the A10, the Ramblers, Sister Jean's Club, the 4th school for Dom, the 2nd school with Loyola in the name. Of course, started his career at Gonzaga, spent 3 seasons there, one of them on the shelf with a foot injury, spent 1 year at LMU, spent last year at UCLA, now joining the Ramblers for his final season of eligibility. Dom is also going through the NBA draft process, although I would be quite surprised if he stayed in the draft process and didn't return to Loyola Chicago. Good on him for getting some feedback, but the lack of success last year at UCLA very likely going to limit his ability to be an NBA player, at least after this season. He only played 11 games for the Bruins. In his first 6 games, which all came in November, he shot 1 of 14 from 3. And then after that, Mick Cronin basically just stopped trusting him entirely. He only played, after those 6 games, he literally only played 21 more minutes for the rest of the season with UCLA. He only scored 5 more points in those 21 minutes. All 5 of those points came against Prairie View A&M, which is a Division I school. That game was on December 17th, so Dom did not score any points after in the year 2025. Disappointing season for him at UCLA. He also played 38 games at Gonzaga, but was never able to crack the rotation, in part because of the injury, in part because there was just a lot of really good guards at Gonzaga while Dom was there. 2 of them that he helped land in Spokane with the tricky trio of Jalen Suggs and Julian Strother, of course. So Dom definitely has his place in Gonzaga basketball history for being a part of that class. But unfortunately, his career outside of one very good season at LMU, where he averaged about 15 points and shot 45% from 3, he was great at LMU. He hasn't done much else in his career. I'm very interested to see what he can do for a Ramblers team that went 25-12 last year and finished 5th in the very competitive A10 conference. I think that's a fun fit for him. I hope that he finds his footing and has a really strong final season at the collegiate level. Well, folks, can Mike Bibby and Shaquille O'Neal, they're teaming up to help resuscitate a Sacramento State program that has not had really any success on the men's basketball side of things. We're going to talk about what's going on at Sac State, what it might mean for the future of college hoops, all of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, and just general entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And it works great for a family environment. My wife and I, we always want to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to our finances. And thankfully with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever before. You can track both your shared and your personal accounts, set your goals together, and stay on the same page without all the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are closing out the show talking about a team that's not in the WCC, that's not in the new look Pac-12, that's not in the Mountain West Conference, although it's been rumored in some kind of conference realignment conversation for pretty much all of those leagues in the last couple of years or so, and that is Sacramento State. I've talked about Sacramento State on this podcast before as a potential realignment target for the Pac-12, as a potential realignment target for the Mountain West and the WCC. Right now, they are in the Big Sky Conference, but the reason that they come up isn't even really because of success that they've had in the Big Sky Conference, because frankly, they haven't had that much success on the football side of things, and certainly not on the men's basketball side of things, but because this program has made a lot of headlines for how hard they are working to make their sports product viable at the next level. For starters, they're an FCS football program that wants to get to the FBS level. For that reason, and that reason pretty much alone, the odds of Sac State jumping into the Pac-12 in the near future are astronomically low. The Pac-12, as much as Gonzaga is a huge brand for them on the basketball side, they're first and foremost a football conference. And to keep their football conference to make sure that their conference is taken at all seriously on the football side of things, you cannot add a program directly from the FCS. Even if it was like North Dakota State or one of the really successful FCS programs, you can't do that. So I don't see it. Maybe the Mountain West, maybe they jump to even the WCC and house their football somewhere else. I don't know, but they're raising a ton of money in NIL funds. They're opening a new basketball facility next fall. They are working very hard to raise money and raise the profile of the program to be a part of future realignment conversations. I bring all this up because they've made a couple of really big moves recently in terms of hiring and in terms of the transfer portal. And it's an interesting look at kind of the potential future of college basketball. For starters, they hired former Sacramento Kings guard Mike Bibby to be their head coach. And the biggest headline for them was not Mike Bibby taking over as head coach. It was the fact that Shaquille O'Neal is now their assistant GM, and he was hired. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm doing that in air quotes because he's not being paid. So he was not really hired. The assistant GM role is really just him throwing some money around and putting his name on the program. His youngest son, Shaquille O'Neal, has transferred to Sacramento State and will play there for his final season of eligibility. So that is why he is affiliated with the program. But because Shaq is very much just a figurehead, I think a lot of people are assuming that Mike Bibby, who was very famous in the city of Sacramento for playing with the Kings in the NBA, the kind of belief is that, they're both figureheads. Mike Bibby is a little bit of a figurehead. Certainly, if he'd made his career playing for the Atlanta Hawks, he probably wouldn't have been hired by Sacramento State. But he's been a head coach in high school, and this specifically at his alma mater, Shadow Mountain High School in Phoenix. He's coached there for 6 years. They've won 5 state championships in the 6 years that he's been there. Still a pretty big jump from high school coach to Division I men's basketball head coach, but it's not like he's been a middling high school head coach. He's been very successful. So there is some reason to believe that this coaching move could work out. And it's unfortunate that it gets lumped in with Shaq, where it's like, oh, that's just like a publicity stunt. Because Bibby is not a publicity stunt as a head coaching hire. Shaq, though, that definitely is. And that's, I think, kind of the interesting element of this. Is it going to work? Because shortly after Shaq comes on, Sac State goes and lands a high-profile player in the transfer portal in Mikey Williams. Now, I say high-profile because Mikey Williams is very, very well known. He's a 6'3" guard, spent last year at Central Florida. In high school, he was the highest-rated high school player in the country when he was like a freshman and sophomore. He had millions of followers on Instagram. Was one of the most followed just people on Instagram because of his dunk packages. He was an incredibly athletic young man. And then he committed to Memphis, and then his high school career kind of plateaued as the other players got their athleticism caught up to him. His size was somewhat limiting. And then he had a off the court issue where a drive-by shooting that he was charged for. Then he decommitted from Memphis, or they kicked him out. He went to Central Florida, played 1 year at Central Florida, played just 18 games, 14 minutes per game, averaged 5 points. So he wasn't particularly impressive, but that's still in the Big 12. He's going to be a good player at Sacramento State. I don't really have any doubt about that. I think he's going to be very good for them, and he's really high profile in name. So it's definitely a continued kind of moving in the direction of we're trying to add name value. We're trying to make you talk about us. We want you to talk about Sacramento State basketball. And I joked about this with my co-host on Locked On College Basketball, Isaac Shade, earlier today, that I'm not sure how many people knew that Sacramento State's mascot was the Hornets. They're the Hornets, Sac State Hornets. If you are learning that for the first time, this is working. I am contributing to Sacramento State getting the attention that they want by hiring Mike Bibby, by hiring Shaquille O'Neal, by bringing in a player like Mikey Williams. And I think the reason that I'm very much okay with this is because this team was very, very, very bad last year. Sacramento State went 7-25 last year. They had an interim head coach, Michael Zeppel, and they were 348th at KenPom. They have literally nowhere to go but up. If this tanks, if this does not work at all, if Mike Bibby proves that he is not capable of coaching at the Division I level, they're still likely going to finish higher than 348th at KenPom. That is about as bad as it gets. The odds of this going worse for them are very low. So why not? Why not make a big move? Why not make a big splash? Because in this era, you have no choice. You know, like you have to get somebody like Shaquille O'Neal to throw their weight around, to throw their money around. Shaq's not going to go out and buy PJ Haggerty. PJ Haggerty also is probably not going to just blatantly take $4 or $5 million to go play at Sacramento State and completely curtail any momentum he has as being an NBA player. They're not going to go get Darion Williams or any of the other like really good players still available in the portal necessarily, but they'll get guys like Mikey Williams. They landed a player from a former top 100 prospect in Brandon Gardner from Arizona State. He didn't play last year, but they landed a guy from UNLV, Jeremiah Cherry, who averaged 10 and 5 in the Mountain West last year. That's a pretty good get. That's a pretty good get for Sac State. I'm really interested in this. I'm interested in this for a couple of reasons. I want to know if we're going to see more of these kind of figurehead GMs. Trae Young took a job as an assistant GM for Oklahoma basketball. He's obviously not doing anything for Oklahoma basketball. He's fairly busy with his NBA career, but it's a figurehead job. I don't really think there's anything wrong with it. I think eventually there needs to be guardrails on some of these positions and obviously guardrails on just NIL and the transfer portal in general. I think that we're still, unfortunately, far away from those guardrails actually happening. But if Sacramento State wants to raise a bunch of money and make as many high-profile, splashes as they can in terms of hiring and in the transfer portal and collect a bunch of money and throw it at basketball players to see if they can make this thing work, cool. Why not? Give it a shot. Is it going to result in Sac State being in the Pac-12? No, probably not. Is it going to result in Sac State being a significantly better basketball team? I'm not sure. My gut says probably not, but I think they'll be better. I think they'll be better for sure. I think there's a real chance they finish top half in the Big Sky, which is a significant improvement from where they were. Again, does it mean that, everybody's talking about Sacramento State in December? No, but they're talking about them right now. And most of the time they're never talking about them at all. So that's a win. That's a win. If you're a Sacramento State fan, if you're a booster, if you're an alumni, that's a win. And I'm interested, I wouldn't say optimistic, but I'm interested in what's going to happen with this Hornets team in the short term with Bibby and O'Neal involved, and maybe in the long term if it does result in them potentially getting an invite to another conference going forward. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much to those of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Again, a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On Zags Discord channel. I appreciate you all. We'll have more shows coming next week, more on the transfer portal, more on the recruiting trail for the Zags. We'll keep you up to date on the NBA Zags and the women's basketball team as well. Thanks again, folks, for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And as always, go Zags.